This is Nancy Leader on the Zeta Report.
Is electromagnetic pulse on the increase? EMP includes both the aspect of a brownout, a drop in the electrical current flow on the grid, and a pulse, a sudden increase in electrical current. Both are devastating to mankind's electronics. This increase is caused by the charged tail of Nibiru, which is vast and wafts over the Earth as Nibiru approaches for a passage. The effect of Nibiru's magnetic blast as it points its north pole toward the Earth can be seen in the magnetosphere maps provided by NOAA. The bow shock deforms. The wings that are normally pushed outward by the solar wind twist and produce eddy flows. Yet the sun is asleep during these contortions. A hole in the bow shock is slightly below the ecliptic, where Nibiru rides. Visual proof of the magnetic blast are the neon clouds and magnetic swirls that appear in the skies, as in 2009 in Norway, and in 2015 off the coast of LA, temporarily halting airplane traffic over the water. The LA swirls were blamed on missile tests, as were the Norway swirls, but the sudden closure of the airplane paths in LA showed this was just an excuse. There was zero warning time. Cavemen tried to warn future generations of what they experienced prior to a devastating crustal shift. Pole shifts are accompanied by great earthquakes, flood tides that rise up hundreds of feet along coastlines, and rivers overflowing their banks. Add in the hurricane-force winds and the hailstorms from debris in the tail of Nibiru lashing the Earth. What the cavemen are telling us is that a precursor sign were the spirals in the skies. Another visual sign of the magnetosphere being walloped are the radar circles that have developed since 2010. These first appeared in Australia, near the Earth's magnetic south pole, going viral on the internet. Per the Zetas, a type of congealing of particles near the radar station due to chemicals dropped in the atmosphere by the wafting tail of Nibiru. Radar circles and malfunctioning radar has increasingly become a global problem. And of course, blackouts come along. They showed up in New York City in 2003 when Nibiru first arrived in the inner solar system, and as recently as April 2015 in Washington, D.C. What is characteristic of blackouts is the lack of electricity, so breakers shut down to prevent a brownout, damage to equipment from an inadequate electric flow. But the DC blackouts were spotty, which is characteristic of EMP. It did not follow grid lines. What causes EMP to be attracted to a region? The charge in the tail of Nibiru arcs to the land, where rock is being compressed or stretched, so that air pockets are squeezed out, what the Zetas call electronic screech. This charge is attracted to electronics, the flow of electrons in mankind's grid. This screech is what causes the Min-Min lights in Australia, ball lightning which chases cars down the road. This showed up in my house recently. Instead of a downed line causing the whole house to black out, it was spotty room by room, appliance by appliance. And I get the sideways push characterized of EMP swipes when I walk into the computer room. What happens when major parts of the grid get hit by EMP? Normally, just breakers shutting down, but when pulse is involved, it can speed up the step-up transformers to the point of an explosion. This happened at the Sanyo-Susquehanna Dam in Russia in 2009, and in the Itapu Dam in Brazil that same year. The Brazilian energy minister stated the Itapu Dam failure was due to an atmospheric phenomenon. What happens when pulse hits electric trains? The train is out of control of the conductor, and a crash can result. This happened in Philadelphia in June 2015 along a curve near a river. Water accentuates the EMP, acting as an attractant just as water attracts lightning strikes. In July 2009, a Disney monorail train crash was caused by pulse, and just earlier in June 2009, a similar surge in D.C., despite a fail-safe system. In April and again in May 2015, South Africa had electric train accidents, both indicative of electronic pulse. A personal story this year from someone in the UK. Returning home from work, she turned the car off, but it turned back on all by itself, the lights blinking on and off. Death by airplane is becoming more common, as when EMP strikes a plane going over water in a stretch or rock compression zone. EMP is directed and intensified. A falling plane has little opportunity to recover. Death by airplane started with a bang when Air France 447 went down over the magnetized Atlantic Rift in 2009. Though all electronic systems notified they were failing, this was blamed on pilot error. Note the location, over water. MH370 in Malaysia went down in March 2014 with the pilot and passengers passing out from lack of oxygen and the plane disappearing from radar. This was due to the pressure on the Sunda plate being pushed down steadily, creating electro-magnetic screech in the rock arcing to the charged tail of Nibiru, but was blamed on pilot suicide. Note this was once again EMP over water, the accelerant. Then the Germanwings plane flew into the Alps, once again undeniably due to EMP, as the cockpit buzzer was not working. But again, an oxygen-deprived pilot was claimed to be suicidal. CERN was not working that day, and months earlier radar had gone out all up and down the Danube River Valley, both signs of EMP. But demonizing the pilot was the establishment explanation of choice. Once again, the plane had been over water. And most recently, the Russian A320 plane exploding over the Sinai as it had turned heading for Cairo due to mechanical problems. This was hardly due to a bomb. Do bombs go off that slowly? It was halfway across the Sinai before the slowed fuel pumps exploded under a pulse. Of course, the bomb excuse was taken, as the establishment was not ready to admit that EMP was taking down airplanes. The airline industry would have a fit, as would the travel industry. But Russia's A321 was the start of some common sense. Noting that the establishment very much follows Zeta talk and knows it speaks the truth, and noting that these downed airliners almost invariably are flying over water when stricken, some changes were made. No more flying over the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba when the Sinai is being pulled apart during the African roll. Sweden, which is surrounded by water in the stretch zone, halted all flights during a recent radar outage. LAX halted flights out over the Pacific, forcing them to land and exit over land when recent neon clouds and swirls were in the skies. So much better than crashing planes and demonizing pilots. A step in the right direction.
Until next time on the Zeta Report, I'm Nancy Leader.